Hello again, everybody. I'm Roger Hoover. Glad to welcome you back to the Crimson Tide Sports Network, and welcome to this Thursday edition of Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota. Make sure you check out their website, TuscaloosaToyota.com. It's Thursday of Tennessee week. It's homecoming. We have a lot to get to on the show, but we're glad you're with us here on the network. As we start to go through the headlines, we'll be using our smartboard from RJ Young, and RJ Young is the official technology solutions provider of Crimson Drive. First of all, let's check out what's coming up on the show today. We will have Coach's Checklist here from the head coach of the Crimson Tide, Nick Saban, as he met with the media for the final time this week on Wednesday night. Then we'll have our Hey Coach preview with Eli Gold, as Coach Saban tonight will be at Baumhower's Victory Grill in Tuscaloosa visiting with Eli. So we'll get a full preview of what's coming up with Hey Coach and the Nick Saban show coming up first of all with Eli. And then we will go down the hall to the other booth, check in with the voice of the Tennessee Volunteers, Bob Kesling, and get a detailed scouting report on Alabama's opponent for this week, Tennessee. Last but not least, Alabama Legends. We have two legends this week. Earlier this week on Tuesday, we had a great conversation with Robin Parkhouse. He is one of the two honorary captains for Saturday, along with his teammate on the 71 SEC champions, Johnny Musso, one of the best running backs in Crimson Tide history. It's great to catch up with him, and we'll be visiting with him in our last segment for Alabama Legends. Taking a look at some Crimson Tide football headlines. First of all, the homecoming matchup against Tennessee comes your way at 6 o'clock on Saturday. Our radio airtime from just outside Bryant-Denny Stadium will be at 3 o'clock, so we're certainly looking forward to having a great crowd pregame and all, of course, throughout the ball game as well against the Volunteers. Will Anderson Jr. keeps playing at a high level. He keeps picking up more honors as the week has gone along. He was named the Bronco Nagurski Player of the Week. He won the Bednarik Award for the Player of the Week, so just great honors for Will Anderson Jr. And we do have finally the first open date of the season for the Crimson Tide. This game against Tennessee is the 8th of the year that Alabama has played since the Miami game straight through. So finally, an open date for Alabama on October 30th, a chance to rest up before the next game will also be at home November 6th against the LSU Tigers. Taking a look at some other headlines across Alabama athletics. We're starting to talk a lot more basketball on Crimson Drive because we are getting closer to the start of the season and really the unofficial tip-off for the year comes your way on Friday night. Tide tip-off at Foster Auditorium. Doors will open at 6:30. Of course, there's a pep rally on the steps of Gorgas Library, so just after the pep rally is done, head on over to Foster Auditorium. The event will begin at 7:30 p.m. There's going to be a dunk contest, three-point shooting, introductions for both the men's and women's basketball teams. It really will be great to see all of that coming up at Foster. And then if you still are in the mood for basketball even after the football game on Saturday, Sunday, it's a charity exhibition game against Louisiana, 2 o'clock at Coleman Coliseum. That is your first chance to see Nate Oates' team on the floor. There will be no SEC Network broadcast or Crimson Tide Sports Network broadcast of that game, so definitely make sure you get a ticket, go to Coleman Coliseum, and support the Crimson Tide. We will have, of course, broadcast on November 9th when Alabama's season begins with a men's and women's basketball doubleheader at Coleman Coliseum. Now taking a look at some other athletics headlines on this very busy Thursday. It's busy tonight on campus because we will have a home soccer match headed your way at 7 o'clock against the Kentucky Wildcats that you can watch on SEC Network Plus. Volleyball last night was on ESPNU. It played Florida really tough. Florida, of course, one of the most consistent volleyball programs in the nation. Gators got the win in 3 sets, but every set was extremely close in that match. Cross country, Vincent Kiprop once again is the SEC Runner of the Week in cross country as he's putting together a terrific fall. And then men's basketball, a couple of honors came in for Javon Quinterly, Jaden Shackelford, preseason All-SEC. Alabama was picked to finish second in the preseason SEC poll, just behind Kentucky. Women's basketball team did not have any players selected preseason All-SEC, as Alabama was picked 10th in the preseason women's basketball poll for this year. And I do want to send a reminder to you as we are talking on this Thursday. This is the time where you're watching these interviews coming up with Eli Gold or Bob Kesling, Johnny Musso. Why don't you go ahead and download your ticket, add it to your iPhone, Apple Wallet, or on Android, your Google Pay wallet. It is so easy to do for both parking and also for tickets. I think people saw the difference going to the Ole Miss game. If you already had your ticket downloaded, the lines were much shorter outside Bryant-Denny Stadium. There are plenty of people that will help you at Bryant-Denny Stadium, but make sure you go ahead, download your tickets now, as those will be scanned off your mobile device. It'll just make life so much easier for everybody coming up on Saturday against Tennessee. Coach Saban thinking about the Tennessee Volunteers as he met with the media last night for his final press conference of the week. It is time for Coach's Checklist from Wednesday as Coach Saban talks about the upcoming matchup with the Volunteers.
Well, we're certainly looking forward to an exciting game this week in Bryant-Denny Stadium, a big rivalry game for us. We've got a lot of respect for Tennessee. They're playing their best football of the season. Our guys have done a pretty good job this week of, getting ready for the game. So, but getting ready for the game is just not how you practice. It's how you rest. It's how you take care of yourself. It's how you get treatment, how you eat, how you rest, everything. So, we're going to have to play our best football of the season. We're going to need a great crowd with great enthusiasm and energy that affects, the game in a really positive way for our team. That's always helpful. I would think because we're playing Tennessee and it's a rivalry game and playing at home and haven't been at home for a while, that everybody should be really excited about, this game and what we need to do to try to play as well as we can possibly play so we have a chance to be successful. Well, I think that they go fast, so people have to get lined up and be ready to play. I think they got a really good runner, and I think their quarterback's ability to run, contributes to that in terms of quarterback run. So when they run the zone play, he's very capable. If you try to cheat the end on the dive, the quarterback's going to pull the ball, and they've been very effective at doing that, and they're very well coached. So they don't usually do it and make bad plays. They usually do it and make very positive plays. So they've got quarterback runs, they've got quarterback draws. They get you spread out and run those plays, which is very challenging for the people up front. So, and they've got ability to throw the ball. So you can't just say we're going to play the quarterback runs. Because they've made a lot of explosive plays in the passing game because the vertical stretch of the field, and when they get you spread out, they'll spit it out there if you don't have enough guys out there, and make positive plays as well. So this offense is very challenging. Yeah, Byron Young has practiced. He practiced today. We're hopeful that he'll be able to contribute some in the game. Drew Sanders is probably very doubtful for this game, but we're hopeful that maybe he'll be, with the bye week coming up and another week. It just depends, they got to re-x-ray his wrist and make sure that everything is okay in there, and we're hopeful that he'll be back for LSU.
And that was Coach Saban last night with Coach's Checklist, his final time meeting with the media, but the next time that he has a microphone in front of his mouth will be coming up tonight. Hey Coach and the Nick Saban Show, 6:30, Baumhauer's Victory Grill in Tuscaloosa. Certainly hope you can join us. The host of the show, Eli Gold, joined us earlier to preview what's coming up on Hey Coach tonight. As once again, it's a very busy week here in Tuscaloosa, so it's a great time to catch up with the voice of Crimson Tide football, Eli Gold. Eli, it's always a special week. The Tennessee week is here. How's everything going?
Doing well, just wrapping up a few things here in the office and then getting set to make myself halfway presentable and head to Tuscaloosa. But yeah, it's interesting, the conversations I had this morning. I've done a couple of talk shows, as I seemingly do every week. And people said, well, how can it be a rivalry? One team has won the last 14 years in a row. And I don't believe that's the criteria. Maybe you disagree. Maybe the viewers disagree. But a rivalry doesn't necessarily get based on current happenings. It goes back to 1901 and builds from there. And of course, this series, as you well know, Raj, Tennessee has won a lot of games in a row, and Bama has won a lot of games in a row. So I still see this as a big rivalry. I spent time today talking with Bob Kesling, the voice of the Vols, and we had a nice chat. And he too, without even any prompting, talked about, there's nothing like a rivalry week, is there? So I'm looking forward to Saturday's game. I sure am.
Yeah, we have Bob coming up on the show a little bit later in the other booth. And just thinking about Tennessee versus Alabama, what have been the most memorable games in this series that you've called?
Wow. Well, obviously there have been so many, but Terrence Cody blocking that last-second field goal, which, as we now know, not only preserved a win that day, but a national championship. And of course, I remember Peyton Manning on that very first play hitting Joey Kent for a touchdown. And, unfortunately for Alabama, set the stage for what the rest of that night was going to be like. So, yeah, this series has been, has been replete with big games, and not so much in recent years. I understand that, but more often than not, you were looking at two top 10 teams going at each other. Even the last time, Tennessee won, they were ranked number 8 in America when Fulmer and his bunch eked out that 3-point win. So there have been a lot of big plays, but I would say for me, the biggest would be Terrence Cody blocking that field goal, and Alabama wins. It was quite the day.
Quite the scene at Bryant-Denny Stadium for that game back in 2009 when Tennessee was coached by Lane Kiffin. They just coached against him this past week. It's crazy how things work out that way.
In this business, everybody just kind of gets recycled sometimes. That's the way it works.
Well, the Crimson Tide are certainly glad that Nick Saban, of course, is still coaching this year's Alabama unit. And what a great bounce back win this past Saturday in Starkville. What were your takeaways from Saturday?
I was looking forward to seeing how they would react, because sometimes a team that hasn't been used to losing at all, you lose a game, and well, all of a sudden you lose a second game, and then that momentum goes that way. But yeah, it was a great performance. Obviously Will Anderson was magnificent, but it was nice to see that he and other guys stood up in the middle of the week and preached to the teammates, here's what we've got to do. This is, enough of this garbage. We don't lose ball games. Here's what we've got to do. And then he stood up and led the team, not obviously offensively, but defensively, and, picked up all sorts of honors because of that. But, when you're in the same sentence with Derek Thomas and others for what you've done. So it was nice to see him speak up and then go out and do it. And I think a lot of people, I really do believe that sometimes there is lots of value to be gotten from a loss. You don't want them, don't get me wrong. You don't want losses. But I think a lot of guys who had never lost a game in college, maybe hadn't lost a game since the middle of their high school days, what have you. I think it was quite the wake-up call in College Station, and obviously we saw the result last weekend.
Certainly did, as Will Anderson, like you mentioned, made huge plays on defense, and then just Bryce Young keeps it going with what he's been able to do leading this Alabama offense.
It's unreal. What's he got? 24 touchdown passes now through 7 games. That's more than Jalen Hurts. That's more than Tua. That's more than Mac Jones. And the guy's just cool. He's cool, calm, collected. He goes out, does his job, doesn't get rattled. That's what I like to see. That's what I like to see in a quarterback. So, yes, it's been wonderful watching his maturation process this year. And, and of course, throwing the ball to Jameson and all these guys. I mean, there's still, you can't let that loss at A&M totally skew things. It's still a darn good football team. And you're right, Bryce is really outstanding. He sure is.
Well, first up on your schedule, we've got tonight's show, Hey Coach, and the Nick Saban show in Tuscaloosa. What can you tell us about what's coming up later at Baumhauer's?
It's going to be interesting. We've got 2 guests joining us in that first half hour, because coming up tomorrow is that tip-off celebration prior to the men and women getting their seasons going. So Christy Curry, the women's head coach, and Antoine Petway, one of the assistant coaches for the men's team, they'll both be with us here later tonight. And we'll just talk about what's going on tomorrow, what the fans can see, what they can enjoy. Then Katie George is going to be with us. She was on the sidelines last week for the Alabama-Mississippi State game. She works for ESPN. She'll be on the sidelines this weekend. So she'll be our special media guest. And, of course, Coach Saban. And he always has lots of interesting things and things we can learn from to pontificate about. So all that's coming up. Well, just checking the clock, not too far from right now. I got to head your way, and we'll be ready to go.
Yeah, it won't be long. And then, of course, this is also homecoming this week. Anything else special for you this weekend for homecoming?
We've got all sorts of stuff. Of course, Nick Saban does 4 or 5 of those Nick at Noon luncheons. People pay, yes, but the money goes to the Nick's Kids Foundation. So it's all for charity. And that's coming up tomorrow at noon-ish, because the coach has always got stuff going on before the luncheon. So Nick at noon is a cute name, but he normally shows up when he's ready. But it's a lot of fun. We've got Dana Duckworth joining us first. She'll talk to open up the luncheon. Then when the coach gets there, he and I sit down on the stage like a couple of guys shooting the breeze. He's gotten away from making speeches. He really doesn't necessarily enjoy that anymore. So he and I sit around on the stage. We just shoot the breeze like a couple of buddies. And that'll be tomorrow at noon. Tickets are available. And then tomorrow night is going to be the Pep Rally, the annual homecoming Pep Rally.
You've got mail.
2 years ago, and I do have mail, but 2 years ago, the Pep Rally was rained out. Last year, of course, there was none because of the pandemic. So it's been a while, but we've got that. It's on the steps of the Gorgas Library, and it starts tomorrow night at 6:30. They've made it a little bit earlier so everybody can go to the Pep Rally, then head over to the tip-off function and be there to support the basketball team. So yeah, it's it's funny. You got so much going on. The ball game itself will be the easy part of the weekend. All the preparation, the stats, the getting the scripts written, all of this stuff done. That's the tough stuff. Come Saturday evening, it'll be a lot of fun and hopefully another W for the good guys.
Certainly looking forward to it, Eli. Just all the best and everything that's coming up over the next few days. I look forward to seeing you in person outside of Bryant-Denny Stadium when we hit the radio at 3 o'clock. And, of course, later tonight with Hey Coach and the Nick Saban Show. But thank you for joining us. Roll Tide.
Thank you, Roger. Always a pleasure. Roll Tide. See you, man.
Great conversation with Eli Gold. We look forward to tonight's Hey Coach and the Nick Saban Show from Baumhauer's Victory Grill. Starting at 6:30, we'll be streaming live here on our Facebook page. And, of course, you can listen to it on the Varsity Network app and throughout all of our radio affiliates across the network. Eli, of course, calling the game for us on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. But for Tennessee, just down the hall, we call this segment The Other Booth. Bob Kesling will be calling the game for the Vol Network. And he's been the voice of the Vols since 1999. It's called a lot of big Alabama versus Tennessee moments. It was great to get a detailed scouting report on the Volunteers from the voice of the Vols, Bob Kesling. Bob, it's great to see you. How's everything going in Knoxville as we get ready for what usually is the third Saturday in October? This year it happens to be the fourth.
Yeah, I'm doing great, Roger. I still have not been able to figure out why the Southeastern Conference cannot figure out how to get this game on the third Saturday in October. I mean, put it there and then build the rest of the schedule around it. But apparently that's too difficult to do. But it's just good that these teams are playing. Looking forward to the game. It's always a special game when Tennessee and Alabama play, and it should be a good one on Saturday.
Do you have any favorite games from this rivalry, either wins for Tennessee or Alabama, that stand out to you the most? You've been able to call a lot of these.
Well, it's probably my favorite game. It's probably not a one I called. Was I was working on the network, spotting for John Ward, but it was back in 1982 when Johnny Majors and Tennessee knocked off Alabama, his first win over Alabama at Tennessee, and beat Bear Bryant at Neyland Stadium. And of course, they threw all kinds of stuff in the river, tore goalposts down. It was a big celebration. But I think the other game that I called was probably the 5 overtime game in Tuscaloosa when Casey Clausen led them to a win. So you got to, wins have not been, they've been few and far between in this series recently, but those are two games that really stand out.
Well, now in 2021, there's a new head coach of the Tennessee Volunteers, Josh Heupel. What have you made of his first season to this point?
I think he's done a terrific job. When he came in, he had a depleted roster, had 30-some guys leaving the transfer portal, was trying to plug guys in spring practice, went to the transfer portal after spring practice, got some other guys to come in. He's playing with 70 players, and then some of those guys are hurt. So he's probably realistically healthy players down to about 60. But what he did, Roger, he came in from day one and just talked about confidence. And, hey, you're my guys. We're gonna coach as hard as we can. You're gonna play hard. We're gonna play discipline. We're gonna play with a lot of poise. And they've done that. And I have never heard him say one negative thing about any of these players. Now, he has said we need to get better in practice. We need to do some things better. But he's never signaled out any one guy or said, well, that guy didn't do this or didn't do that. It's all about we've got to get better doing this. So I think that positive attitude and his confidence is rubbed off on this team. And I don't want to say they're playing over their heads, but they're playing as well as they can possibly play.
Well, we've seen the offense put up a lot of points on the scoreboard, specifically the Missouri game. You look at the South Carolina game as well. When this offense is playing at its best, what is it doing?
It's running the football. You look at their stats, the number of first downs they got at the top of the league, rushing attempts at the top of the league, yards rushing per game right there at the top of the league. I think everybody gets the conception and misconception perhaps about Josh Heupel that he's like a mad scientist. He wants to throw the ball over the place. That's not true. What he wants to do is he wants to run football, and then when he gets numbers that he likes in the box, he's going to throw it over your head. And that's what he does, and that's what has been so successful for Tennessee so far. Look at their rushing numbers and tell me this is a pass-oriented offense. It's not. They want to spread you out. They're going to put 2 wide receivers basically on the boundary on each side. Then they'll have a slot guy, and so they get your defense spread out. If you go out and cover those guys and the numbers match up, they're going to keep running the ball at you, and that's what they've done. And so if Tennessee is rushing for over 200 yards against Alabama, there's a pretty good chance they're still in the ballgame.
Looking at the quarterback situation for Tennessee, we've seen Hendon Hooker play extremely well at times, as well as Joe Milton. Where does the quarterback situation stand kind of midway through the week, getting ready for Saturday?
Well, Josh Heupel, of course, plays it very close to the vest like all coaches do right now. I think one indicator he had on Monday when he said this is not a long-term injury that Hendon Hooker had in the game last week against Ole Miss. So that leads you to believe that he's going to be back sooner than later. Whether it's Saturday, we'll just have to wait and see. And Josh Heupel's not going to tell you until they come out and start warming up on Saturday. So if Hooker is going to play on Saturday, though, I think that gives Tennessee a good chance to stay in the game. He has just played so well. It was interesting, he didn't win the job coming out of fall camp. Joe Milton won the job, and I think he won it fair and square. He looked to be the better quarterback running this system, but it didn't translate to the game field. And then Hendon Hooker gets his chance when Milton gets banged up, and Hooker just took off. And what I think everybody's been impressed with Hendon Hooker is the fact that when he didn't win the starting job, he didn't mope and didn't moan and groan, didn't threaten to go in the transfer portal, none of that. He just started working harder, and that hard work has paid off. There's a confidence this Tennessee team has with Hendon Hooker running the show because he makes good decisions. He's only thrown 1 interception all season long. He doesn't put the ball in harm's way very often, and if at all. And he's got a very good grasp of this offense. Plus, he's got a good sense on when to run. He's a guy that doesn't want to run a lot, but he's got good feeling for when he should run. And most of the time when he does take off, it's pretty effective and he gets first downs.
What can you tell us about Tennessee defensively, led by defensive coordinator Tim Banks?
I think this Tennessee defense has far exceeded anybody's expectations. I think everybody starting the season thought, well, the linebacker core is depleted. The defensive line has lost some guys. How are they going to plug guys in? And I think that Rodney Garner, who has come in as the defensive line coach, and Willie Martinez, who's the secondary coach, they have just done an unbelievable job of getting these guys to play. They had veterans in the secondary that had some success in the past, but suddenly Theo Jackson is playing at an all SEC caliber. They have Trayvon Flowers, who has really kind of made everything in the back end really solid. Warren Burrell has played well. And I think the secondary has been one of the strong points of this Tennessee team. And at linebacker, Jeremy Banks, who is a guy that's been around here for a while and has gotten a chance to play, but has never really stepped in as a guy that's been a big contributor. Well, that's all changed this year. Banks is playing at they play fast and they play hard, and they don't miss tackles, and they run to the football. And I think that has been a big part of this team's success. And Matthew Butler in the defensive line has really been a leader. He's come back and could have gone out last year. He's already got his degree, but he came back and wanted to show people that he was better. And the guys that stayed, and to a man, I think a lot of them said they just didn't have much fun last year. They didn't really like what was going on, and they didn't, in fact, at times didn't like to go to practice. Well, that's changed. These guys love to go to practice. They love to work hard. And I think that's why Tennessee is a much better football team this year.
It's interesting now in this age of the transfer portal, you have players going back and forth between different SEC schools. You see Henry To'oTo'o go from Tennessee to Alabama. But how about Brandon Turnage, who made the transition from Alabama going to Tennessee? How's he been received in Knoxville?
Well, he hadn't been used very much. And then suddenly 2 games ago against South Carolina, Theo Jackson can't go. And in fact, that was a game time decision. And so Brandon Turnage, who had never played the star position in his life in a game, gets put in there. And all he does is make 14 tackles and is named the SEC Defensive Player of the Week. So I think that shows you again what this team is all about. Next guy steps up, next guy plays as hard as they can possibly play. And that's another compliment to Willie Martinez and Tim Banks, the fact that Turnage was able to play. And I just happened to, when the game was over, we went back over to our studio to do the coaches show, and I happened to be walking in with Brandon, and I looked at him and I said, "Brandon, you ever made 14 tackles in a game?" He said, "No, man." I said, "Well, you did a great job today." And he said, "What did you expect? I'm a baller." I said, "Okay." We need you to ball the rest of the season too. So, but he had a big smile on his face, and I think he was typical of what is going on at Tennessee right now. That I think they're all having fun. I think they all knew this was going to be an uphill climb, and I think getting to a bowl game this year was a realistic goal. It's within grasp for this team, and they got a tough sled now coming up with Alabama, and then they got to go to Kentucky and then Georgia. So I mean, they've got some tough games coming up. But they've got a couple of winnable games later in the year that could get them to 6. And I think that's what's really propelling this team. And if they can knock off one of these teams in the next couple of weeks, that'll just be gravy, I think.
Well, we certainly love the football rivalry between Tennessee and Alabama, but as well as the basketball rivalry that's developed between these schools. You look back at the SEC tournament a year ago, and Bob, once again, these look like 2 talented teams that Nate Oates has here in Tuscaloosa, as well as Rick Barnes in Knoxville. What can you tell us about the Big Orange and the Hardwood coming up?
Well, last year's team was really talented, but didn't really play as a team that well, especially at the end of the season. And so you lose 2 first-round draft picks, and now you got to plug some guys in. But I think the one thing that was really missing from last year's team was a true point guard. They had a bunch of guys that played the position, but nobody really embraced the position. Well, that's going to change with Kennedy Chandler. He is a true point guard and 5-star recruit, and I think he's going to run the team, and I think you're going to see him distributing the ball. He's a guy that doesn't have to have the ball in his hands a lot or shoot a lot. He wants to get the ball to other guys and let them go. John Fulkerson coming back is a big bonus to this team. Josiah Jordan-James coming back is a big bonus. So they've got veteran players coming back, and then they're sprinkling in some of these new guys. So I think it's going to be one of the deepest rosters that Tennessee's ever had. And it's a veteran team. And now with the point guard, I think they're expecting really big things. Tennessee's ranked, 18th in the country. For me, that's a little bit low, but I guess they're basing that on the fact that they're trying to see how some of these young players come along. But it's a very talented basketball team. And if Rick Barnes, which he usually does, puts all the pieces in the right places, this team could really be special.
It's going to be the SEC opener coming up later in December. Alabama against Tennessee in basketball. Of course, we got the football game on Saturday. And Bob, before we let you go, our fans got to see you in Kenny Chesney's film, More Than a Voice, talking about the great SEC broadcasters through the years, as Eli Gold, John Forney were featured here at Alabama, John Ward, and of course, you featured for Tennessee. Just what did it mean to you to be part of that documentary and take a look at a lot of your great friends and people you've gotten to work with through the years?
Well, that's one thing. I've been working on the Ball Network, I guess, since 1980 or something like that. Started out as John Ward spotter. And so I've been traveling around this league for a long, long time and have gotten to know most of those guys, or at least, meet them. I got to meet John Forney, got to meet a bunch of the guys that have come before all of us right now. It's a special fraternity. It really is. It's a bunch of guys that kind of, when they get together, They kind of understand what the other guys are going through and the ups and downs of this business, and the good things and the bad things that go with it. And so it's kind of, there's a special bond there. And, you know, we haven't done it in a couple of years, but they were doing an annual meeting in Birmingham before the season, basically for us to get together to go over rules and talk with the commissioner. And that was special to get. And I think for the most part, everybody was there, maybe missing one or two each year. But to get all of us in the same room at the same time was really neat. And to get there and talk to each other. We don't get to spend as much time together, you know, but on game day, you get maybe 15 or 20 minutes, but it's still a special time that you kind of swap stories and tell each other and, you know, catch up on your families and all those type of things. So it's a special fraternity. It's always been that way. And I think that when you look at that, and I hadn't seen the whole documentary, but some of those guys were just such characters. And when you go back to Bob Fulton and Larry Munson and on down the line, I mean, they were larger than life. And one of the stories I told in the documentary that they used was, I think this is true, that for Larry Munson, John Ward said he breaks every single broadcasting rule there is out there, but he's the greatest communicator that's ever been on the radio. And I think that has a lot to say with a bunch of those guys that really set the foundation for all of us, because the games weren't on TV. The fans sat there by the radio every single Saturday and lived and died with whatever John Ward or Larry Munson or John Forney, whatever they told them, that was the truth, and they believed it. Kaywood Ledford, all those guys. And that's what developed such a great bond between all of those guys. And, you know, it's different now because so many games are on TV and they don't live and die on everything the radio announcer says, but radio still plays a big part for Tennessee fans and Alabama fans, because they want to hear what their guy has to say. And I think they really, for example, they want to get the Tennessee slant. They want to know what Pat Ryan thinks about things, and Tim Priest before him. So I think radio still plays a huge part in college football, but not like it did back in the 50s and the 60s for sure.
Well, you still do tremendous work for Tennessee on the Vol Network, Bob. Just thank you so much for joining us and giving us a detailed scouting report on the Volunteers. We look forward to Saturday's matchup and hope you have a safe trip to Tuscaloosa. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. Always good to talk to you. I'll see you Saturday.
Fun visit with the voice of the Vols, Bob Kesling, as we get set for Alabama against Tennessee. And it's a really long winning streak right now for Alabama in this series. And as you go back, it's now been 14 straight years Alabama has had a victory against Tennessee, trying to get the streak to 15, coming up with a victory on Saturday. If you go back to the early 1970s, Tennessee was able to win a few matchups in the late 60s and in the year 1970. That head coach at Tennessee getting that win, Bill Battle, who later went on to be, of course, the athletic director here at Alabama. We've talked with him about that game, but it was the 1971 Crimson Tide that started a new streak of victories against Tennessee that wouldn't be snapped until 1982. And at the core of that team in 71 was the outstanding running back for the Crimson Tide, Johnny Musso. And he was able to join us over the phone this week as one of our Alabama legends, as he, Robin Parkhouse, who we had on Tuesday. They are the honorary captains for Saturday's game, so it was great to catch up with one of the best running backs ever in the University of Alabama's history, Johnny Musso. Roll Tide, Johnny. How's everything going?
Well, it's going great. Thank you. Roll Tide back at you.
You excited to get back to Tuscaloosa along with Robin Parkhouse and the rest of the 1971 SEC championship team?
I'm very excited. We had a lot of great players on that team and a lot of good friends, and a lot of memories roaming around between us. So we're excited to get back.
What stands out to you the most about that 1971 team? Because Alabama had, of course, won some national championships in the 60s, won SEC titles as well, but it was really that 71 team that helped get Alabama back to where it wanted to be.
Yeah, I think you said it well. We were a team that was a lot different program when we left. I think it was in a lot better shape when we left. They had some pretty poor years for Alabama's team that followed, those teams in the 60s that won national championships. And I think we kind of set the program for set the the pace for the teams that followed us. We went from a passing team that was there in the '60s with Namath and Stabler and Sloan and Scott Hunter, and then we transitioned into a wishbone team and a running team that kind of paved the way for the '70s and really was Alabama's best decade until most recently. So we felt like we were a team that was pivotal, and kind of made a difference. So it was a good run. It was a good feeling in retrospect to have played through that era, even though it was a hard era to play in.
Yeah, and looking back at that time, first of all, as a running back, what was your reaction when you heard that the wishbone was coming to Alabama, and then how did that offense really fit your strengths?
Wow. Even before we went to the wishbone, my junior year of the '70 season, we started running the ball. We started to get away from the being a primary passing team to a primary running team. We did pass a lot, but we started emphasizing the run and being fundamentally sound. And then we went all the way to the wishbone the following year, which kind of solidified that decision that was made sometime the year before to really emphasize the run. And we had good backs, but the heart of our team was we had an All-American center and 2 All-American guards. Now they were All-American, some of them in the years that come. Like John Hanna was a sophomore, and he then he was a junior the '71 year and a senior the following year. But we had great offensive linemen, and we had a quarterback that really knew how to run the offense. Terry Davis was probably not a name that a lot of people will recognize, but he was a great wishbone quarterback. I mean, the offense was made for him, and he ran it so well. And so our team it just happened to be, we really had the personnel to run that offense.
And you certainly ran it well in 1971, and this is Tennessee week. Any memories from the matchup with the Volunteers back in 1970 you remember?
Well, I remember the years before, the sophomore and junior year, they beat us up a bit, and I do remember that we kind of evened the score in '71. I know it was it was a really hard fought game, and but that rivalry back then was only second to Auburn, and it was not a distant second either. I mean, it was a really there was a lot of rivalry there. And so, yeah, I remember the Tennessee games well, and they were always just a really hard battle and a real physical game.
How would you describe your running style? When we visited with Robin Parkhouse earlier in the week, he talked about, no one could solo tackle you. Everyone had to gang tackle you. Is that how you felt when you were running the football?
Oh, no, I just felt like I was always stumbling, trying to fall forward, but I don't know. I didn't have a great speed. I had good balance, and I had good lateral movement, and so I could avoid the initial contact, but I just didn't have enough speed to take it all the way. So I ended up fighting for my yards, and I don't really know how to. I look at any game film I have, and I think, man, did I ever gain over 5 yards? It seems like they were all short runs. So I don't know. I don't know that I had a really very glamorous running style.
Hey, those yards certainly add up. And, of course, you got to play for the legendary Paul Bear Bryant. And I always love asking players that played for Coach Bryant, what sticks out to you the most about him and the life lessons he taught you, along with the football, but still the life lessons you use to this day?
Well, he did tell you the value of hard work and of having a goal and keeping your eyes on it and surrounding yourself with good people. And those are great great lessons. Coach Bryant's really, his persona was different than any. I've never met anyone before or since that, just the person who they are, just as it people were in awe of him, just his appearance and just to be in his presence. It was just a unique. He just had this persona that was really different. He was a really big man. He was really stocky and strong looking. He had this leathered face. He was a really unusual person, the way he talked. And he was a great motivator. And a lot of his motivation was because he had this persona and that he had this intimidating factor that you always felt in awe of his presence. And that really put him in a good position to motivate players, and players followed him. And they, when he said something, you believed him. And, he was just a great leader. I don't know how else to say it.
He certainly was. And for you, we know you're coming back to Tuscaloosa this weekend for the Tennessee game along with your 1971 teammates. But what have you been up to in the last several years? How's everything going for you?
Well, I'm a very blessed person. The good Lord's blessed me in many, many ways. We've got 5 kids and 10 grandkids, and my youngest is having a little baby in January. He'll be number 11, and so we've got great community of friends and family, and so I just feel extremely blessed. We got a lot of roots in Alabama and Birmingham and Tuscaloosa, and just really, really grateful for the life that God's given me to live.
Johnny Musso, we can't wait to have you back on campus here at the University of Alabama coming up this weekend. Just safe travels, and thank you for joining us on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. Roll Tide.
Oh, Roll Tide. Thank you very much, Roger. God bless.
Such great memories with Johnny Musso. Again, we visited with Robin Parkhouse earlier in the week, and those conversations can be found, of course, on our back archive of Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota, but also on our Alabama Insider podcast. Just love hearing those memories, especially anytime we get to talk about Coach Bryant, especially on a week like this. The Tennessee rivalry meant so much to Coach Bryant, and Johnny Musso helped start a long winning streak for the Crimson Tide back in 1971, and now Alabama looking for win number 15 against Tennessee in a row coming up this Saturday. Well, let's take a look at what's coming up across the Crimson Tide Sports Network this weekend as we will take a look at our weekend schedule. Starting with tonight, of course, we started the show with Eli Gold. Hey Coach, and the Nick Saban Show comes your way live starting at 6:30. Eli had a great preview of what's coming up on the shows. We'll be talking basketball a little bit at the beginning with Antoine Petway from the men's team, Christy Curry from the women's team, Katie George is the media guest, and then, of course, we will have Coach Saban as well. Then on Saturday, it's time for football, Alabama against Tennessee. 3 o'clock airtime here on the network, and then our kickoff coverage will start at 6 o'clock. We'll have the Royal Furniture Booth Cam live throughout all of our coverage coming up between Alabama and Tennessee, so we're certainly looking forward to that. Sunday, we'll be recapping the Tennessee football game as Chris Stewart will be joined by Coach Saban for the Nick Saban television show. Make sure you check your local affiliates. That's also available later on demand on RollTide.com. Then Monday, we'll be taking a look back at the Tennessee game as well with Crimson Tide Rewind at 6 p.m. Baumhower's Victory Grill in Vestavia Hills as Eli Gold will talk about the matchup with Corey Reamer and start looking ahead to an open date. Alabama's only open date of the season is coming your way next Saturday on October 30th, but probably some thoughts on the final month ahead for the Crimson Tide coming up there. And then before you know it, it'll be time for Tuesday's edition of Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota. Also, a couple of reminders, do download your mobile tickets. We talked about that earlier, but go ahead and download your tickets, parking passes now. That will certainly help you when you come to campus as we take a look at our game day map. And here's a great view of everything that's going on outside of Bryant-Denny Stadium around the Walk of Champions. You see the Coca-Cola kickoff zone with Chick-fil-A. Texas Roadhouse will be set up there with some delicious food for you to enjoy as you're getting ready for the Walk of Champions. And then don't forget as well, A.J. McCarron from 3 to 4 will be along with the Aflac Duck. I would love to get both of those autographs. Two great legends, A.J. McCarron, and then the Aflac Duck, who's been teaming up with Coach Saban for the last several years for some really great commercials. They will be there as well, as we'll have the Mercedes-Benz Fan Fest going on. Just look to the Tuscaloosa statue at the corner of Wallace Wade and University, and that's where you'll see us on the radio stage starting at 3 o'clock with our pregame coverage, as Eli Gold will be out there. He'd love to take some pictures, sign autographs. Great opportunity as well to see Rashad Johnson will be coming by the stage as we have our pregame coverage start on the stage outside the CTSM Village that's also right there as part of the Mercedes-Benz Fan Fest. Just a great area. Again, the Walk of Champions is right there. That is the place to hang out to get ready for a Crimson Tide football game coming up. So just remember, just look for the Tuscaloosa statue, look for the Walk of Champions. You'll find us all right there. And again, Texas Roadhouse, Chick-fil-A, A.J. McCarron, and the Aflac Duck doing an autograph signing, taking pictures. It is going to be part of a fun Saturday in Tuscaloosa as Alabama hosts Tennessee. Well, this has been a great edition of Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota on this Thursday. And if you missed Tuesday's show, you can find that here on our Facebook page as well. And we're going to have just so much content coming up, so make sure you like the Crimson Tide Sports Network on all of our social media accounts. Follow the Alabama Insider podcast for detailed conversations as well. We'll be having Eli Gold's Scene Setter released on Friday night. That's always really popular to get you in that football mood, as well as this week on CTSN, presented by GoPuff, taking a great look back at all the content we've had from this past week, giving you a comprehensive preview of Alabama against Tennessee. Got to say a big thank you to the guests that we've had on the show today, Eli Gold, Bob Kesling, as well as Johnny Musso. Thanks to our Facebook Live producer, Ethan Carabin, putting all of this together for us on this Thursday edition of Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota. For everybody with the Crimson Tide Sports Network, this is Roger Hoover saying thank you for watching this edition of Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota. Look forward to seeing you Saturday at Bryant-Denny Stadium for Alabama against Tennessee. Roll Tide, everyone.